So to get this started, and let me take a drink of water. I'm going to really just kind of pick up with where we've been at with the content that we're doing with Keith. So I would imagine most of you have been working on your doorways, correct? You have some doorways that you've been working on. Okay, so when it comes to social media, and specifically what this training is going to be, is to give all of you an idea of like what kind of content you can be posting. There's someone getting a lot of noise. I don't know who that is. I'm going to just mute a couple people. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. That was distracting. Okay, so what we're really going to be talking about today is getting a flow with what type of content that we can be posting on social media, just to give you guys that framework to be working off of. And so what we're going to look at is considering that there will be 5 content buckets that you can work with. And now I'm going to give you 2 of those content buckets, and the other 3 can be your doorways that you've already established. So one of those content buckets is your story. We need to always be sharing our story with our audience because that builds know, like, and trust. It gets to show proof of concept before we've created proof of concept with clients, because we are our own proof of concept that we can coach and be coachable. So just sharing your story, just like I shared my story at the beginning of this, it gave you guys a little bit of a background of who I am and why you should maybe listen to me or not. So we always want to be sharing our story, and there's so many different creative ways that you can share little pieces of your story that are going to be of service to your audience. And that's really, we always want everything that we're sharing to be of service to our audience. So if I'm sharing my story, how can a piece of my story really be of service to the people who are following me? What kind of insight can they get? What kind of aha moment can they have in their own life by hearing the things that I've been through? So our story is one of those pillars. The other one is going to be our offer, because we're always going to have something that we are offering, some kind of call to action, even if that's just us trying to build a newsletter. There's always going to be something that we are hoping maybe that our followers will opt into. And so, as we know, we don't own social media. We don't own our followers. Your newsletter is a beautiful way to have that connection with them, because Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, those could disappear tomorrow. They're not likely to do that, but they could. And if that happened, then how would we reach the people who have been following us? So that's why it's nice to have that newsletter. So of course, if you have one-on-one offerings, if you're launching group programs, that can all be a part of the offer content bucket. But there's always something that hopefully, if we're giving enough throughout the week, if there's enough service, if there's enough value, we can always offer something. And then that leaves the other content buckets as the stuff that you guys have been working on with Keith. So I would imagine we all have doorways that we've been working on. And I mean, it could be something as simple as, we're everyone's health coach here. So these could be your 5 content buckets. You could have your story, your offer, nutrition, exercise, mindset. Those could be like your 5 content buckets that you want to create content around. And it's like, great, that's wonderful. That's super easy. But then how do we actually create the content? And I think that's kind of something that a lot of people struggle with. And so I want to acknowledge like the mental energy, the mental capacity it takes to write something, write an email, write a piece of content is very different than the mental capacity it takes to coach a client, for example. Different capacity than it takes to hop on camera and talk about something, right? Like all of these things require different mental capacities from us. So the way that I think is really helpful is to split those things up. So if I know what my 5 content buckets are, here's how I can split things up. On one day, I can block some time in my calendar and say, this is a brain dump. I'm just going to brain dump as many ideas as I can come up with for each of the content buckets. So you could say, my story, here are all the things that I could talk about from my story that could provide value to my followers, right? If I'm talking about nutrition, here's a ton of ideas. We could talk about, I mean, we can go in depth. We all know what you could talk about, like micronutrients, resistant starches, like da-da-da-da-da, you name it. I could make a massive list of things, a massive list of ideas for exercise, a massive list of ideas for mindset. And so right there, you have so many different topics that you can talk about, so that when it comes time to write, you don't have to sit there and like brainstorm, well, like, what am I even going to talk about? What am I even going to say today? You just reach in, you grab a piece, you're like, oh, I'm going to talk about resistant starch today. So then you can just sit down later and write something about it, because again, that requires a different mental energy than brainstorming, writing, and then we get to the place where we need to create some type of graphic. So if you're on Instagram, of course, you have to post that content with an image. And again, different mental capacity, right? So there's a lot of ways that we can create images. Is anyone struggling with like, what kind of images am I actually going to be posting on social media? Is that something anyone has encountered yet? Kind of, yeah. Okay. So I do know I have some questions that were submitted about social media. So I will touch on this a little bit. Sean, if you don't feel like you're in the right place, by all means, you don't have to stay here. I'm just going to be going over social media, and then it's completely open for any business questions that anyone has. Okay, so when it comes to the actual images that we're posting on social media, it's good to have variety, of course. I don't know if any of you have been using Canva. That's one question that someone was asking about Canva, and should I be paying for the pro account? Specifically with this question, I will say start with the free trial always, to see if it is something that you're actually going to use and that is helpful for you. If you notice, like, yes, I'm using Canva all the time too, because you can have like the templates to create, your text graphics. There's all kinds of stuff that you can create using Canva, and it makes it really easy, especially if you're not a designer. The templates are just like wonderful to just plug and play. If you have like a quote that you want to use, just use Canva. Yes, Alicia, Canva's wonderful. And I'm even a designer. I know how to use like Illustrator, Photoshop, and all that stuff. And I default to Canva just because it's so fast and easy. So yeah, you can start with Canva, free. I mean, a lot of times people don't even need to pay for the paid version. If you do, it opens up a lot more features to you, but like, don't worry about that right now. Just start messing around in Canva and see if it's what you want and if you enjoy using it. And then from there, you can get the paid version if you like. One of the questions about Canva specifically, someone was wanting to know about using stock photos. And so there's like a whole library of photos in Canva, and those are all stock images that you can use. So the license is available to you. You don't have to pay anything extra. There's a lot of free ones that are in there, and you don't have to like tag anyone. Inviting someone else in. So yes, Canva has stock photos. And I also want to mention there are other websites where you can access stock images. One of those is called Pexels, PEXELS.com. Those are all free stock images. And then also, just so you guys know, you can find stock images on Google search as well. You just have to go to the advanced settings and click on the usage rights, and you can like specifically search Google images for royalty-free images. So these are some ways that if you're needing additional like imagery to use on your social media feed, these are available to you. Something I want to say though is like, just be aware of like overdoing it with the stock images. Like, spend the extra time to try to find the stock images that don't really look like stock images. Because at the end of the day, if you have a social media feed that is just full of stock images, like, you don't really seem like a human being. So it's much better to like literally just snap photos on your iPhone and let those be your images than have a feed full of stock images. So it's also helpful too, and let me go back to these questions. One of the questions was the power of our words versus pictures of ourselves on Instagram. And I want to say, like, a variety is good. If we have a feed that's just like text images or just our face, I mean, it doesn't feel all that enticing. So having variety is really good. And you can test things too. Like, if you're just wanting to know what's going to work better, you can look at the analytics that go along with the images that you're posting to see like, oh, when I post these like quote graphics, they're performing way better than if I post photos of food or of myself or, whatever that may be. You can actually check the analytics. But really at the end of the day, like what I want to say is the most important thing is like your actual message, like what you're delivering to your audience. Because if you're getting too caught up in like the aesthetics and like, how is this performing and this and that, like, we just want to be sure that our message is being received by our followers. Let me double check some of these questions here to make sure that we're covering everything that was submitted. So one of the last questions that I want to touch on specifically with like the aesthetics of our feed, one of the questions that was asked was, and I'm sure you guys have seen this if you use Instagram, where it's like you look at someone's feed and it's like there's like a pattern or like the images kind of all go together and like create like that puzzle kind of thing. The question was, is it too distracting to use those because the person who submitted the question really loves them? And I want to say, if we're specifically talking about Instagram, more often than not, the way that your image that you've posted is going to be seen is on the person's feed as they're just scrolling through. So a lot of times, like your beautiful, like aesthetically pleasing feed isn't really going to be seen by people unless they specifically click on you to go look at your page. And I think, if you like a really beautiful feed, if that like means something to you, by all means, feel free to do whatever feels good for you. But at the end of the day, that can really be a barrier to entry. So let's say you just have this burst of inspiration, you want to share something really meaningful on your feed, but, oh, I have to go create this special image and make sure that it fits with this and that. And then like you might not ever post it. So if you're making more work for yourself, or if you have it set up in a way that like you're just not going to share because it has to be perfect, like let that go. Like don't let that be a part of your plan. Because again, going back to like the actual service that you're providing, the information that you're sharing, like that is the most important thing. We don't need to like get caught up on like the aesthetics of a feed. So going back to what we were saying before I went down this rabbit hole of questions that seem to fit in here well. With our content buckets, how does that feel for everyone to think of having like these 5 main things that we are considering posting each week? Does that give like some ideas and a little bit of context to what you could be sharing? Yeah. And the idea, in a perfect world, I'll say perfect world, doesn't really, you get to determine what is perfect for your business. But if we have 5 content buckets, there's 5 days to the week. If we're taking weekends off, you could consistently post from these 5 buckets 5 days a week. Now, that can also be a barrier to entry, right? Because some of us are like, ugh, I don't want to be on social media that much. I don't want to be on there all the time. And I want to kind of talk about this idea because I've seen a lot of resistance. A lot of people are just like, I don't know what to do with social media. I don't know if I want to be there. And what I want to say to you is go back to the work that we've been doing with Keith. Go back to your ideal client. Know your ideal client so well that you know where they are spending their time. Are they on social media? Are they there? If they are, what platform are they on? Right? So if they're on Instagram, then spend your time there because that's where your people are. That's how you can reach the people that you want to serve. If they're on Facebook, spend your time there. If they're not on social media, you don't need to be there. There's a lot of other ways that we can reach people. So I think one of the examples I had used in the first call was like, if you were to have like talks at your local natural food store, like this is a way, or in your Bible study group, maybe there's a bunch of people there that those are your ideal clients, like there you go. Or maybe like your kids have a bunch of friends and their parents are like your ideal client. Like spend time where your ideal client is. Know them so well that you know exactly where to spend your time and you don't waste it anywhere else. Don't feel like you have to be on social media just because someone said that you should be. What questions do you guys have so far just about the social media stuff? I didn't want to get too like in depth, too far down the rabbit hole because I know not everyone's going to be on Instagram. or on social media in general. Yeah, Alicia, I see your hand up.
Well, thank you for everything so far. I was really enjoying the path you were going down when you started talking about like on day one, you can do a brain dump.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's really helpful for me to think about having these chunks of time to do these different tasks.
Mhm.
And um, I don't know, I guess I've got kind of two questions is like, what does day 2, 3, 4, and 5 look like? And then the second question is, do you plan your stories? Because stories feel so in the moment. Like it
Mhm.
feels like even when I watch your stories, I'm like, oh, she just like had this inspiration to talk about this right now.
Yeah,
But I'm curious about like if you plan some of that stuff.
sure. Yeah. So, okay, question one, the process of creating them. Yeah, I can go more in depth into that. And really, I don't know if all of you are like me, but it's like if it's not in my calendar, it's probably not going to get done. So I have to be really strategic with like what parts, like what are the steps to getting something done? And like, am I specifically putting that into my calendar? So the brain dump, that is what I talked about, that could be your day one, whatever. You could do this each week. Um, Definitely spend time doing that. Then we know we need that separate time for writing the content. And some people do batch working. So maybe on Tuesdays, you have like an hour and a half window where you say, okay, my goal for this week is to post 3 times, and I'm going to write the content for all 3 posts. So then you can look at your brain dump list and you can say, okay, I want to talk about X, Y, and Z. And then that's all you do is you just sit in that space and say, this is a creative time. I'm going to put some binaural beats on and I'm just going to get in the zone and I'm going to write out the content for this. And then let that be that. You would have a separate time where you're creating the images for that. Because again, like we have to be aware of like how long it can take to like get our minds to shift from one like method of working to another. And maybe you're writing the content and creating the graphics on the same day, but they're separated. There's at least a break in between there. Now, could you sit down and power through from beginning to end? I'm brainstorming ideas, I'm writing something, I'm creating this graphic, and then I'm scheduling or posting whatever. Of course, anyone can do that. It doesn't make the process enjoyable, and we can get really burnt out on it. We'll have days where we're just not able to shift our minds from point A to B, and then we're like, posting on social media sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. And then you're just not going to do it. So I think that splitting things up in that way really gives our brains the chance to just be in one zone of genius, and then the next, and then the next, and just it seems like a smoother process. Does that answer those questions? And does that feel like something that you would be able to practice?
Yeah, like you basically split it up into brainstorming, writing, and like the graphic part of it, the
Mhm.
like design part of it, and then I guess there's the posting aspect. And I find that because my spontaneous nature is like lending itself to my like social media work ethic, I find myself doing everything at once.
Mhm.
And I'm just knowing that I need for long term sustainability to have a plan. And so thinking that I can like carve out these buckets of time in my calendar really feels good.
Yeah, yeah, and that doesn't mean that things can't be spontaneous too, because there will be those moments where you're like, I have just this perfect vision from, the beginning to the end. And
Yep.
like you can take advantage of those times for sure.
Mhm.
I just know that it can lead to burnout if that's the only way that we're creating. So being really intentional and deliberate and
Yeah.
just setting aside that time, it makes all the difference.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. Um, and just to touch then too on the scheduling aspect of it, I know with Instagram, because we are all fighting the algorithm there, to use a social scheduler, it does mess with the algorithm. It will be shown to less people if like I used to use Later as my social scheduler, so I would put everything in there and just let it automatically push, it's kind of like a set it and forget it kind of thing. But when that happens, it's like it won't be shown to as many people. So I just create everything, and then I will either like airdrop stuff to myself, or I text myself all the time, or use notes on my phone. There's a variety of things that I'll do. And then I will push directly from Instagram. I know with Later, you can set it to push to your phone so that then you can push it to Instagram on your own, like manually. But that just hasn't been the way that I've been doing it lately. But as we know, there's a million ways to do different things. And so just kind of really testing and seeing what works for you. As you create this process, you're going to come up against moments where you're like, ugh, this really sucks. It doesn't feel in alignment with me today. What can I do to shift my process to be more aligned and more sustainable for me? And then what was your second part of the question? Oh, stories. Yeah. So for me, I don't plan my stories. It's really like if I have something that I'm currently offering, like I might hop into stories and talk about it. If I have a post that goes on my hard feed, like I will share that in stories. A lot of times it's just inspiration will strike. So if I've had a one-on-one client and something really big came up, like that might inspire me to get on stories and obviously not talk about the client, but talk about a general lesson and share that lesson with my audience. Same with my group programs. Like there can be things that come from that. I mean, there's inspiration everywhere. There's inspiration in your own life. So I think that, you were talking about spontaneity earlier. I think that stories is where that spontaneity can exist. And I think really the only, I guess, two strategies that I have when it comes to stories on Instagram is, one, to use the engagement tools. So using polls and questions and the sliders and all of that stuff, because we want to have that interaction with our followers. And I always try to have something so that I have like the little rainbow ring around my image to always have something in my stories. It's very rarely do I not have something in there. Maybe like on Sundays, I might not post something, but for the most part, I try to keep that going.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Any other questions? Yeah, Pam, go for it.
So I'm still newbie to all of this and
Yeah.
sort of just absorbing everything. So I really appreciate you offering this.
Yeah.
As far as like frequency of posting, and you're talking about algorithms, and I understand, so I follow people on Instagram. I'm not really posting,
Mhm.
but what type of frequency would you recommend? And is it like you mentioned, sounds like you're doing stories pretty much every day, and then I know posting is separate. So what type of?
Yeah. So I feel like first and foremost, like if I'm going to give you like a strategy for how often you're posting, it's going to be individual for everyone, because above everything, I like to talk about how alignment and sustainability are number one. Because if I said to you, Pam, you have to post every day, you're probably going to be like, ooh, and you might do it for a couple days and then not do it. And so I reflect back or turn the question kind of back to you as like, well, what realistically could you post? How many times per week? How many times per month? Whatever really feels good for you and is actually attainable, then that's your number. It's like what is truly sustainable for us. Because if I said 5 times a day, every day, 365, they'd be like, what? That's never gonna happen. So yeah, finding a method that is something that you can consistently stick to would
Okay.
be what my recommendation is.
Okay. And that gives me peace.
Yeah.
And then I guess along the lines of what Alicia was talking about, scheduling, how far out do you schedule all this? Like, do you give yourself like a month's worth of content, or are you trying to stay? What have you found?
Yeah.
And again, I know that would be different for everyone, but I'm in my mind, I'm like, oh, it'd be great to have like a whole month's worth and then just have less to do. But
yeah. And I mean, you're right. It is individual. Because, I talked a little bit about batch working. So yeah, like you could just batch everything and have everything set for the entire month. And that really works really well for some people. and doesn't work well for others. Like, do I have the capacity to sit down and crank out like 20 posts in a day? Probably not, but that's because like writing's not my current favorite creative expression. You know, like I would much rather like get on camera and talk. I feel like that's a lot easier. But honestly, it's try it out, see what feels good. Do 1 week and see how that goes. And if you're like, wow, that took a lot of energy for me to create that, then that gives you some feedback. If you're like, wow, I could have sat there for another hour and continued to write, well, then you're like, maybe I can do 2 weeks, maybe I can do 3 weeks. So there's so much trial and error with all of this. There's no one right answer. It's just really seeing what fits, you know, your daily routine, your lifestyle. And it might change. There might be times, you know, we go through seasons in life where you might be in a real creative flow and you are creating further out. And then you're going to have seasons of life where it's a struggle just to get 1 week planned ahead. Or maybe you're like batch working, planning. Are you crazy? I'm just like trying to post each day, like, and creating it all at once. So it's knowing that you're going to have those seasons and just being willing to do what you can, you know? And I think that it goes back a little bit to when we get this feeling hung up on social media. I feel like a lot of this kind of goes back to that, where we're like, ugh, this isn't enjoyable. I don't like doing this. It feels like a lot of work. This isn't what I wanted to sign up for when I wanted to be a coach. I think there's a lot of opportunity for some reframes when we realize that we're having a really negative approach to social media, because I think the way that we need to look at it is, okay, we all feel like deeply called to service, right? Like we're all coaches. I think that that's kind of like in our DNA, that we want to be of service. And we feel like social media can feel like kind of like slimy, like marketing and selling, and ooh, I don't want to do that. And the reframe is that's not at all what it is. It's connection. We're connecting with people. We are providing a service to people, whether they sign up for our programs or our one-on-one offerings, that doesn't matter. I mean, of course, we want to make money doing what we're doing, and you know, we should. I think we absolutely should. But really, it's being of service, giving value, being there. Those are the really important things. So I think having that reframe and knowing what a service we are providing when we're able to show up online, to stay in that energy instead of like, oh, I have to do this thing. Like it's really helpful to have that mental shift.
Yeah. I think I'm sort of getting over, I haven't done it yet, but I'm working through that hump of, ooh, social media, and looking at, well, wait, I follow people and I get value.
Mm-hmm.
And why can't I do that? I guess I haven't, it's sort of a mental shift from, I'm not that person that does that. And yet maybe also reframe for me is, rather than, oh, I have to, oh, I get to, that's part of serving.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely like to say like social media is not selling, it's serving.
That's
So,
helpful. Thanks so much, Leslie.
yeah, you're so welcome. What other questions do we have? And they don't have to stay in the realm of social media. If we have other questions.
I'll jump in, Leslie.
Yeah.
I just want to say again, thank you for hosting this, and I've really appreciated the other questions and kind of just all of this conversation. So my questions, I have two, and one is kind of still on social media. I was wondering if you could speak to hashtags.
Yeah.
I saw there's an app for like hashtag grouping, maybe something about that, but I didn't look into it further, or if there's a way that you do it.
Yeah.
And then my other question was about newsletters. So I don't know if you want to stick with hashtags first and then.
Sure. Yeah. So you can look at hashtags as just another tool. And you will hear me say a million times, like there's so many ways to accomplish something. Hashtags are a tool. We can use them. We can test them. You get to find what works for you. When it comes to hashtags, we can use up to 30 hashtags in our posts. When you're picking hashtags, for example, hashtag love. Okay, that's really super common, right? If I went and looked at hashtag love, there's probably like a billion billion images that are under hashtag love. So when we're picking hashtags, we want to find like this sweet spot of not hashtagging with something that is so broad like that, because what happens is when you hashtag your image, it goes, falls under that hashtag. The moment you put that under love, it's gone, because you and 2 billion other people also posted an image with hashtag love at the same time. So don't like fall into the hashtag love, hashtag inspiration, hashtag whatever, like don't do the super common ones. And also we don't want to do like the crazy obscure, like no one's searching, that kind of hashtags. So like Courtney's coaching adventure, like if that's your hashtag, no one's searching that. So it's like, where's that sweet spot? Where are the hashtags that maybe have about like 10,000 images? And so you can just type in different hashtags and see how many images fall under those different things, and finding that sweet spot of, where will my stuff actually be seen and who's actually searching for this stuff. So yeah, finding what's going to be that sweet spot. And just because you can use 30 hashtags doesn't mean that you have to use 30. I know for a while 11 was the sweet spot for people. But again, this is just trial and error, right? Like there's no right or wrong way of doing it. So find a collection of hashtags that really work for you. Maybe you have a different set that you save for each kind of content bucket. So if one of your content buckets is nutrition, maybe you're like, these are like 5 nutrition specific hashtags that I want to use. And so maybe you couple that with like, these are hashtags I always want to use. So, I mean, if you want to hashtag things with your name, you can do that. Like something general like health coaching, which that might be too broad, but you could have the hashtags that you like to use for everything, and then maybe some hashtags that you use for each content bucket, and just test it and see. People do find things through hashtags. I think there are other better ways to get your stuff discovered. So something like partnering with another health coach and like doing a cross promotion kind of thing, like you hop on their stories, or maybe you guys are just sharing each other's content. Like you're going to be discovered through those methods way more than you probably would be discovered through hashtags. So that's something to consider, because that's really what hashtags are at the end of the day, is like a method to be discovered. So it's like, yeah, you can put the time and energy into creating some hashtags and just use them and just see if that works. But if there are other ways that you can have your content discovered more easily or more, more rapidly, maybe the energy is better spent those other ways. The only other thing that I will say about hashtags is like where you're putting them, because you can put them like at the bottom if you have like your text, and then you can just pop it down there at the bottom. Some people like to do it there. Some people will do, if you put the periods, you've probably seen that before, if people do a period and hard returns, so there's like 5 periods. People do that so that it's like hidden unless someone actually clicks to see more. And another method is doing it in a comment. So a lot of people do that as well. There are social schedulers like Later, you can have that already put in so that when your image posts, then the first comment with your hashtags will post as well. But again, we know that messes with the algorithm, so it's probably not the way to go. But yeah, just pick some hashtags that you like, see if they make a difference. If not, then find other methods that work better for you. Does that answer questions about hashtags?
Yeah, that definitely answered it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Was there something I saw also about like using alternate text? Is that a thing?
Alternate text, is that like we have the basic font that is in copy, and then is there the
Scratch that, never mind. I saw it somewhere. I feel like kind of in between, like where like kind of on the side of where Pam was saying, it's like I feel like I've been more of an Instagram consumer versus like really trying, like I've posted stuff but not really trying to post from a business point of view, so it's like feels like a whole new world still.
Yeah. Well,
but no, that was definitely answered a lot of questions, so thank you.
Cool. Yeah, of course. To speak to that a little bit more, when it comes to like making that transition from consumer to like more of a business user, I really recommend just following some people that are using it in a business method that you feel inspired by, that you look up to, and just pay attention to how they're doing things, how they're using hashtags, how they're using alternate text. If I don't really know what that is, but I'm assuming it's the, like, on Instagram, you can do like different kind of funky fonts. That's my guess, but I don't really know about all that. But yeah, just look and find people that are doing what you think is cool and see how they're doing it and just learn from them.
Cool, thank you. And then my other question was, whenever you're talking about like scheduling that you kind of block out that time for your content for posts, is that also when you would do like your content for newsletters? And then kind of along the same lines, how often are you sending out a newsletter? Like what's the regular amount of time that, I know that's probably individualized too. That's going to be your answer.
I feel like at this point, you guys all know that I'm going to say that. So I'll stop saying that because that's the default. Yeah, so newsletter, you definitely want to set aside like that time where you're in that creative writing space. So put that on your calendar. This is an area where like doing batch content work might be a little easier because you're not trying to add all these elements of, like the creative visual stuff that goes along with like a social media post. And it kind of what we were talking about earlier too, with all those content buckets, like those content buckets can apply to your newsletter as well. So when you're sending something out to your newsletter, like you can dip into those categories. But yeah, the frequency, I mean, if you're sending a newsletter once a week, that's fantastic. These don't have to be like super long, like novels, and we don't need a bunch of like all kinds of stuff in there. If any of you actually open and read newsletters, you don't really have the capacity to spend forever in your inbox. So even if it was just something as simple as something that would be like an Instagram post, you can just put something short and brief that's in one content bucket in your email and just let that be that. The intention with the newsletter is to continue to build the know, like, and trust with your audience and to just be of service, so how can you do that once a week? You can just drop in and share something about nutrition, something about exercise, something about mindset, the things that are in those buckets. But of course, if like sending something once a week is not realistic for you, then what is? Is it sending a newsletter once a month maybe? And that's great.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sorry, let me look in here. Let's see these questions. I saw Sarah, when you refer to your story, do you mean creating content that expands on your personal experience with one of your doorways, an article, or are you specifically talking about my story on Instagram? So there's so many ways that we can use our story. And it doesn't have to be like our entire story from beginning to end. So think about, let's say you are offering your first group program and you are going to tell a story about what it took for you to overcome money mindset and being able to invest in yourself. And like that would be a personal story that you get to tell about yourself, but then it ties back to like your offer if you're in the middle of a launch. So that's a way of using your story to convey a bigger message. Does that answer your question? I'm like going back to read this, but then I'm also trying to look at your face.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, you're saying it can be any way to tie in your personal experience with something you're offering. It could be even like, I just wrote a sleep article. It could be my own personal experience and what helped me or something like that.
Exactly. 100%. Cool. Any other questions? And let me look and make sure I didn't miss anything in here. Yeah, Pam, go ahead.
So I'm just having the thought, the idea of posting and the idea of stories is like, any tips for newbies? Like the thought of posting a story with me feels super awkward.
Yeah.
Any tips? I'm thinking like, maybe that's something I can like practice and have like, so like my daughter would be super blunt about what she thought about it. Is that a good way to kind of dip your toe in?
I would say Honestly, if you want some tough love, Leslie, like just start doing it. That is the only way to get over it. Like, and that's the only way to find your voice. That's the only way to find your stride. That's the only way to discover what works and doesn't work. I mean, I could go back into my archives of my stories and send it to you, and you'd be like, whoa. Why are you whispering? Why is only half your face in there? Like, I mean, we got to start somewhere, right? We all start with like really weird and awkward stories in the beginning. But yeah, the only way you move past it is by doing it. And then you'll be like, wait, why was I ever worried about this? And I know it can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm like basically live to the world. And it's like, no, you're not. You're not live to the world. You're live to however many people are following you, but really it's like 1% of that because not everyone's going to see it.
Right.
So it's like, just consider it's just a space for you to show up and experiment and have fun and see what works for you. And just take the pressure off.
Yeah. Do it scared is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, if you stumble over your words, who cares?
Yeah.
Post it. Like, just go with it. Just do it. Be messy. And that's how you figure things out.
Yeah. And that's being authentic.
100%.
And thanks, Alicia.
Yeah, Sarah.
Just to clarify though, your story can be the written word. I mean, from Keith's perspective, his, encouragement was to start with one mode of communicating with your audience that you're most comfortable with. And like for me, I know I wouldn't be comfortable with video just yet, but maybe later once I've, written more. And
yeah.
Anyway, that's what you're saying, right?
Well, okay. So I think that you'll hear me say this a million times, there's many ways to get from point A to point B. I think that, yeah, if you don't feel comfortable on camera and you just want to stick to the written word, that's great. But I'll tell you, like, if I'm watching stories and I'm just seeing a bunch of writing, I'm swiping past it. I don't care. I'm not going to sit there and like hold my finger on the screen to pause it and read it. Like, that is not engaging. I'm just going to move right past it. So I would definitely encourage you to get on camera, like if that feels aligned for you, because that's going to be way more engaging. People are going to want to stop and watch you because you're a person and they see your face and they hear you talking and wow, she's speaking really intelligently about something. And I'll say from my own experience, like I can get really tongue-tied really easy, and I could let that be like a barrier to entry for me, and I don't. I get on camera, I talk, I stumble over my words, and I don't really care because I'll caption them. And that's where I can kind of like clean it up. Like if I'm like, oh, why did I say it like that? Or why I didn't get that word out, or I didn't say it the way I wanted. I'll type it the way that I wish I would have said it, but then I'll post it. I'll let what I said be messy and sloppy, but I'll caption it really beautifully, and it's just out in the world.
So you're saying that you would diversify your mode of communication in opposition to what Keith says.
Yeah, and I think with, there's no right or wrong way to do anything. I think that for me, it makes sense for me to dive into both worlds of video and text. Like I can do both. I want to explore both. How do I know what I ultimately want to do if I'm not like dabbling in both areas? And I don't want to spend just so much time. I almost feel like for me personally, if I were to say, no, I'm going to just wait on stories and I'm just going to be over here writing stuff and not showing up, like, it's like I can use that as an excuse to like hide behind my words. And I'm not saying that's at all what anyone's doing or what anyone is suggesting. I just think that there's so many ways to communicate, and we know that there are people who are auditory learners. We know that people like to learn by reading. We know that people learn a lot of different ways. So why not make your content available in ways that more people can learn from it?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I know for myself, I tend to gloss over videos and I like to read. So we're like opposite. So I wouldn't reach you, but maybe I would reach me
Yeah,
with my content.
right, right. And yeah, so there's no right or wrong way at all. Whatever works for you. Again, this is like that barrier to entry, right? Like if showing up on video feels awful for you and you don't want to do it, like you're not going to do it then. So it's like, that's, we already know, like that's not aligned for you. So like do the thing that is truly aligned. No right or wrong way. What other questions do we have? Is there anything in the comments here that I've missed? Okay, these are just about the hashtags. Alicia, were you raising your hand? Go for it.
Yeah, so just going back to the newsletter piece, the step before that would be creating an opt-in or lead magnet, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So something like download my free guide to the top 3 ways to eat for anxiety, whatever.
Yep.
And I'm wondering how do you figure out, obviously you need to know your target market, but like, how do you figure out like what's the juiciest thing you can offer for free that people are going to want to download it and therefore give you their email address?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So yeah, going back to what you already said, like knowing your audience, like of course that first and foremost is going to be really important. I think that, and I can speak for myself, I know it's easier for me to create an opt-in if I know like there's something bigger after it. So like if I'm offering a group program, what would be a smaller free kind of teaser that could preface that, that is going to give someone enough information, be of high value and of high service, and then leave them really wanting more to then potentially want to come into the one-on-one offering, the group offering, you know, whatever that may be. That's kind of, I think, the juiciest and most enticing way to pull people into a free opt-in. You can also just have a free opt-in for the sake of an opt-in and bring people into your newsletter. It just depends what it is. It has to be enticing enough that people want to give you their email, you know, and have you showing up in their inbox. So figuring out what that is obviously takes a little bit more time. And I mean, utilize our peers. Like we're a whole community here. If you have ideas, like you can bounce them off of the people in the group. You can also engage your audience and say, hey, I'm going to create something. What would you rather have? And like, let people vote, you know?
Yeah.
You could say, do you want this 3 tips on burnout or da 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 da, you know, like let people be engaged and a part of the process, because then when you launch it, like they've already been invested in the process.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's great. That's a great tip. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Which I used that process myself, and it was totally natural. I created a free opt-in, which I know you know about that, but maybe not everyone does, but I had a free opt-in and I let people vote on things. I let people vote on the color of the program that I was developing. I let them pick the name. I even let them pick what I was going to wear in the videos. So it was just like a really fun way to just bring people into the creative process. And I mean, I've had a lot of people opt into it. So, you know, it was definitely a success. It continues to be.
Yeah, and I enjoyed engaging in your creative process, which Leslie posted on her stories, like, what should I wear? Like, what should my colors be? And I was like, this. And of course, then I wanted to see how it all came together, and I wanted the free, valuable information.
Right, and even something as silly as the free thing that I put out was a series of 5 videos. And at the very end of the last video, my dog like pushed her way into the room and like you could hear her nails on the floor. And I was like, I'm not going to re-record this. I'm just going to let that be in the video. But then I went into my stories and like shared. I was like, this happened. And then I put a little thing like for people to vote, like, I'm going to listen for that, or silly dog. Like, it's just, having these like fun little ways to engage are really important. And I'll touch on that a little bit more too, because, you know, as I'm encouraging all of you to use these engaging tools in your Instagram stories, we want to provide like really fun things for people to like vote on and engage with. And, you know, I can go real deep. I am a wide open book. I will share my deepest, darkest, heaviest secrets with you, but that's not the place to do that. And it's not the place to ask other people to do that. So if I'm like, if I put one of those little question boxes and say like, what's the most challenging thing you've ever been through? No one's gonna share that. Like, no one's going to be like, oh, you know, this awful thing happened and I'm telling you, and like, no, that's not the thing. But if you do like really simple things like almond butter, peanut butter, you know, sweet potato, white potato, like we can show our community like how to engage with us by giving them really easy, kind of low level, like just fun questions to play with. So definitely encourage all of you to try that tactic and see how that works. What other questions do we have? I see we're an hour in. I will definitely stay on for at least another half hour. Go ahead, Pam.
Off of what Alicia was, her topic about newsletters, is that, maybe I'm like totally out of the Instagram know-how, but is that something people can opt into newsletters through Instagram?
I don't have my phone here. You can set up a number of things from the buttons on Instagram. I don't think newsletter is one of them, but you can have, because there's a link that you can have on in your bio, and that can be where people can opt in there. I think usually you can only do like message and shop, and I'm trying to remember what all the button options are, but I don't think you can do that directly from a button, but you can have that link there.
Okay. I'm sure I could Google it too, but I was like, I don't think I've ever noticed that on anyone that I follow, but
yeah.
Thanks.
Welcome. What other questions do we have? We can get out of the world of social media too, just as a reminder, we don't have to stay in this space.
I could ask a non-social media question, unless someone else has something on the tip of their tongue. No. So I actually sent you an email right before this, Leslie. I signed up for Acuity and the $15 a month thing, and I've been really happy with it. I think it's really made it very easy for my clients to book appointments, especially new people. I've had a few just people make appointments without ever sending me an email or a message on anything. I don't know how they got my name. Later I'll ask them, but it's been pretty cool. Yeah. So that's why I did my website early during the practicum, and then I integrated the Acuity in my website so they could just book right there. All free right now. So next step, once I'm ready to start charging money for my sessions, Keith had recommended not really posting your prices on your website. Yeah. So my question is, well, one, I got feedback from my cousin who's interested on my website, and she was like, people want to know fees upfront before they do a free consult. So it's sort of opposed to Keith's recommendation. So my question is for you is, should I set up this back end area where people can book future appointments, but still have the free consult on the front end of my website?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I don't publicly share my rates because I think, again, and I've talked about barrier to entry so much, but people without hearing what their transformation can be with you, without meeting you, without knowing if you guys all work well together, people could see a rate and be like, nope, not going to do this, and never take those next steps. So I think it's very common for people to have a free consultation without rates shared somewhere. And then during the call, the focus of the call is, well, what could we do together? like that is the focus, and then we can share what those rates are. I don't think there's anything wrong with not sharing rates up front. And I would
So
advise against that.
what was that?
I
You
would
advise against it.
advise against that.
Yeah.
And until you get to like this place where you are just like massive celebrity coach and you can just put those out there to actually weed out the people that wouldn't make the investment. Then you wouldn't waste your time with those calls. But right now, I think it's important early on to just at least get people on those calls so that you can have like the chemistry sessions, see if you guys work well together. And it's just practice for you too, to be able to have those calls, even if a client doesn't ultimately sign up. It's just, you know, practice and experience for you.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that I use that. My next question though is that a program you recommend to continue with, like incorporating Stripe? I guess this would all be on like the back end, or does it really not matter what software you use?
I mean, I don't think it matters, but Stripe is a super common one, especially when you're using Acuity. Like that setup is perfect.
Okay.
As long as it's working for you, then, you know, keep doing it.
And so would you not even put on your website, the front end, all the details of the types of like the visioning session and the sort of structure of coaching, or is that all stuff you would send people later once you've had the initial contact?
Yeah, so it's kind of up to you. People do it different ways. You could share up front, like even on like social media, this could be a thing where you're like, this is what it's like to work with me, and here's the structure. And if you want to learn more and see if we work well together, like here's how you can book a free call. Like you can have the structure and all of that out there if that feels good to you. Like that doesn't detract from it, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, share as much as you feel comfortable sharing. You can put it all out there and just have the rates be something that you actually talk about on the call together. And, you know, when you talk about it on the call together, you give them an opportunity to even be coached through the process, because money is a hard thing for a lot of people. And so that gives you the opportunity as a coach to coach them through it. If they truly want what you're offering, but they have that like money mindset thing coming up, then you can coach them through that if that feels, you know, good for you and good for them. And it's really supportive a lot of times to have a coach you through the process. So you can kind of get out of your own way and be like, I really do need the help. And yeah, I actually have the money to afford this. I'm just scared. You know, I don't feel worthy. I don't feel, you know, whatever excuses we tend to say when we don't want to invest in ourselves.
Yeah, I appreciated on the last call, you guys discussed a little bit like how to come up with that first number. Yeah. And I'm still not sure what to do, but I also just wanted to ask you about sliding scales and how you handle that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's definitely nice to offer that if you are in the place where you can offer something like that. Defining those numbers and who, you know, you would pull into like a lower rate. I mean, all of that is completely up to you, of course. I think sometimes, I mean, we can promote it publicly that we have that. Sometimes it's just something that on the back end we'll let people know if they're like, wow, I'd really love this, but I'm not in a good financial place. I lost my job during COVID or this or that. And then you could tell them, well, I do have this available, you know, because you would know at that point if they would be kind of a fit for that structure. Because if you just put that out there, you might have people trying to take advantage of a situation.
Yeah. Thanks.
But do whatever feels like authentic and in alignment, and you know, that feels good.
This is a really hard thing for me because I feel really weird about charging money.
Yeah, and that's
something I'm gonna have to work on.
Yeah, it's really very common, especially like what I was talking about earlier. Like most of us as coaches, like it's in our DNA. We just want to serve, and so many of us would do it for free, just because like that's why we're here. Like coaches know, like this is my purpose here on earth. And so I'll just do it for free. But we need to charge, because then you become a better coach. You can reach more people. Money is not inherently bad, money in the hands of bad people, bad things can happen, but money in the hands of good people, really good things happen. And I think that especially the people who want to be of such high service and have issues around money, you can always consider bringing in like a charitable thing. So it's like, 10% of my income goes to this, and that could be something that you talk about very openly. And it makes you feel good when you're bringing in substantial money to know a portion of this is going to a cause that I really believe in. And I think those are easier ways to kind of build that comfort level with money, and knowing that everything is of high purpose, and everything that you touch.
Yeah, I like that idea. Maybe even of having a monthly like charity that rotates or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And something to consider too, just while we're on the subject of this, I mean, you can always have consider like scholarships, where either maybe you are offering a scholarship to people of need, or you could have an offering for people that come to you, because you're going to have people that come to you where money's not an issue, where you could have like a fund where people can put money into a scholarship for others to be able to work with you for free. There's a lot of charitable ways to look at all of this stuff. It's really helpful. Help us get over our own mindset, money mindset things. And anytime I think about, this contrast of I want to be of service and then money can be a bad thing, one of the things I always love is like Mother Teresa had a private jet. She did. There's nothing wrong with that. It goes back to when I say like money in the hands of good people, good things happen. What other questions do we have?
Hi, gals. Just finished my lunch, so
Welcome.
yeah, I've been thinking a lot about money too, and still trying to figure out, what I do want to charge. Do I want to charge a certain amount at the end of the program and then change that fee once I get certified, and then change it, once I pass the national board, or, just trying to think of different options. And I guess kind of what I want to know is like, what's the average rate that like a new coach might charge? And maybe it's probably dependent on like where you live and all of that, but I'm just wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah. So, gosh, an average number, it's probably impossible to even give that, I think that all of our certifications, all of our experiences, like everything adds to the value of our service.
Mm-hmm.
And I even said this in the first call, if you were able to catch that, like a lot of times in the beginning, we're just guessing. We're just picking a number and going with it. And you're always going to raise your rates. Like it's just going to happen over time naturally. So I think being able to pick a number that I think it's good for us to like pick something that's a little higher than we think initially, because I think it's really common to like undersell ourselves at first. But pick a number that you feel confident that you can deliver that value, so that you're not later like, oh gosh, I should have done more. I could have done better. They didn't get the results that I thought that they wanted. Like we can like have this whole spiral when we think that we could have done more. But just knowing a number, like without doubt, I'm confident that I can deliver this value, and just stick with it. I don't know if that's helpful, but you gotta start somewhere, and it just takes practice and experience, and you'll feel more confident in the number that you pick as time goes on. I definitely encourage people to look more at the value of what's being received than like what your hourly rate is, because a lot of people will get caught up in that hourly rate concept of, I could never charge more than $200 an hour. If you have that mentality, then that caps you. And we don't want to cap ourselves in our service. And I think a really great example would be, say you are a coach who helps people stop smoking. And I could say, would this person be willing to spend $200 an hour each time we're on a call to quit smoking? Well, maybe the answer is no. But if I said to someone, for $3,000, you will stop smoking in 3 months. Like, I'm sure someone who's addicted to nicotine would be willing to pay like big money to break that habit. And so it's, what is the value that you're delivering? I help people stop smoking cigarettes. $3,000, perfect, take my money, I want to stop smoking. But if we're like, oh, what does that break down to like per hour? Then that like starts to feel sticky.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope that's helpful. It's just, it's tricky in the beginning. Like, I will acknowledge that, like, it's tricky putting a value to our services, but you get practice and it becomes a lot easier. And especially when you know you've got like 20 people like banging down your door trying to sign up with you, that you can probably raise your rates. What other questions do we have? Anything that I didn't cover in the yeah. How are we feeling? Is there anything else? I'm happy to answer any other questions, or if you can't think of anything on this call, you can always follow up via email. Yes, Alicia, ask away.
I'm just gonna bring things back to social media for a second.
Of course.
I've been like, I post whenever, again, like literally whenever, 8 a.m., 4 p.m., 8 p.m. And I'm aware that timing of posting matters because the algorithm and because like, when is your target audience consuming content? When are they on Instagram? So I guess I'm just wondering, what's the best way to figure out the best time to post?
Yeah. Well, Instagram can tell you that. If you go into your analytics, you can see the breakdown. It'll have like, it's a little bar chart that shows you what the activity is throughout the day.
Okay.
So just find the peak, and that's the time to post. Yeah, you can do that, and you can also just do your own A/B testing. You're like, let's see what happens when I post at noon. You know, then it gives people all day really to see your content versus posting at 8 p.m. But we want to catch people when they're on, for sure. But then always share what you've posted in your stories too.
Yes.
Just get that little airplane and share it there. And be like, check this out. Be your own hype person.
Also, do hashtags work in stories?
Mm-hmm.
They do. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you can hashtag. What's the number in stories? It might be 10, maybe. I'm not sure. The way that people like to do that is to do your list of hashtags and then like get the little eyedropper inker out and either ink the background so it's the same color and you don't see it, or you can just, you know, when you scale something, you just like shrink it itty bitty, or you can even drag it off the screen, but the tag will still be there.
Yeah.
I just don't always like to like display all the hashtags because I feel like it looks like, I'm trying to get everyone to see my stuff, like, which we are, but I don't know. I don't really like the vibe of like, look at all these hashtags, so you can hide them.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Is there any way you can show us?
Yes.
Use stories. That's like, it came on too late in the game for me.
Okay. Are you asking specifically like how to shrink and hide hashtags on stories, or?
Can you, I don't know, you're talking about showing hashtags in the story. Is that in the text?
Yes. So.
Okay. And there's some limit on it versus a regular post. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, you can only have certain amounts of hashtags. if it's like, if you go over the number, they just deactivate. Let me demonstrate a little bit here. So I will take a picture of my dog who's sleeping next to me. Okay, so here's my dog who's sleeping next to me. And I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna post this, but hashtag dog, hashtag cute, hashtag love, all the things that I would never actually say.
I guess my question is like, you're saying to just repost your post, your regular post in your story, but you might have to delete some of your hashtags.
Okay, so we're not asking about hashtags then. Let me just demonstrate this part really quick. So we know if we have our hashtags here, we can do the little ink dropper, copy a color, and then it's like you can't even see the hashtags on my dog anymore because they're the same color. Alternatively, see, here they are, and then I'm just gonna like push them off the screen, and now they're not there anymore. That's all we're talking about with hashtags. When it comes to sharing your post.
Oh, because you don't think it looks nice to have them, but you want them to be hashtagged, like
so they would still show up.
That's what you were saying. Okay, I couldn't follow exactly what you were, because I don't work with.
I always just like say like it looks thirsty, like you're just really trying to let it, and I'm like, I don't like that vibe.
Makes sense.
Is that the question? I just want to be sure that I got it. Otherwise,
I think so. I didn't quite understand what my question was, but now I understand. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And I do have one more question.
Ask away.
Again, with social media and like not wanting to be on it all the time, but knowing there's certain things that are helpful to do every day. One thing that comes to mind is like networking, or like following accounts and like liking their, like the engagement piece. So not only putting your own stuff out there, but also engaging with others who could potentially become referral partners or who could potentially become clients. So I guess I'm just wondering like what that can look like the time spent on social media, and what are sort of the buckets of things to do in that time.
Yeah. So I think we could even go back to what we were talking about earlier about scheduling time in. So if we want to be mindful of the time that we're online, like we can say, okay, I'm giving myself 20 minutes on Tuesday to just engage with other people. So you're scheduling it in, you're being really intentional about what you're doing and just like reaching out. So if there are people who are, say, like they're aligned with you, they're really like big time coaches though, maybe they have like 100,000 followers, you can go to their content and like respond to people who were commenting, and like almost like, we want to be mindful of coaching other people, but just going into other spaces and being of service, and people will see that information that you're sharing, and you'd be surprised what can come of those when we do those. More than that though, yeah, definitely spending time with other, like actually connecting with the creators themselves, and something that we can even do as a group, like we can all be each other's hype people. And maybe I'll post this in the forum, like if we all follow each other on Instagram and we like and comment and engage with each other's stuff. So what would happen is, say I post something and like a handful of you to support me came and commented on that. Well, the algorithm's going to be like, oh, people like this. Let's show it to more people.
Yeah.
And so then that means more people who follow me will now see it, instead of like the 2% of my following that Instagram actually shows my stuff to. So that's the way that we can support each other. So just like a support train, like I'm going to go hype up all of your guys' stuff and comment. And when we do that, I will say just dropping a couple emojis on someone's comment does not count as a comment. So we want to be sure we're saying at least 5 words. And so that's why like being engaging is really helpful. So if someone comments on your post and just does like the 3 fire emojis, like this is fire, you can respond and say, wow, thanks for the support. What was your favorite part of this? Or like, what really spoke to you? because then if they respond, they're like, oh, you know, it just really made me think about how I've been doing this thing. Well, then that's counting towards the comments, and that's counting towards the engagement. But the most important things that the algorithm favors the most is when you bookmark something, like that is the number one best thing. And then it's shares, and then it's comments, and then it's likes. So I know it's like really easy to be like, oh, only 12 people liked my image. Well, that's fine, because like likes don't really matter. We have to look at those analytics and see, oh, but like 5 people shared it. That's a big deal. There are 3 people who bookmarked it. Like those are the really, really good ones, the ones that we want to strive for. And it's like, we can actually ask people to do that. So you can say, if this post really spoke to you, be sure to hit the bookmark button and save it for later. So we want to even think in that context of where we are giving information that's so valuable that people would want to bookmark it. Like here are my top 5 tips for getting on burnout. And it's like one of the carousels where you swipe through and you see like the 5 different things. People are going to bookmark that.
Yeah.
So it's like thinking about how can I create content that is supportive of what the algorithm really wants to see.
Yeah.
And by carousel, you mean when there's like multiple pictures for the post?
Yep, those
Okay.
are called carousel posts. So you can do up to 5 images that you can swipe through. And those are good because another thing that the algorithm looks at is how much time is someone spending on your content. So when they're swiping, think of how much time, like so long as it's engaging and it's like not too much information, because sometimes if there's too many words on the screen, people aren't going to read that. But if it's like these like 1 sentence, quick, snappy tips that people can read as they swipe through, they're going to swipe through all of them. And that's many more seconds than they would have spent just looking at a picture of something. So it's knowing that those help. Reels, obviously, is a shorter video that people can watch. Posting different types of content, just think, how can I keep someone engaged here and keep them here longer? Yes, Pam.
So I'm thinking, if I'm like just sort of gathering all this information, letting it simmer, feel like, okay, now I've got the hang of it. How
Mhm.
frequently does Instagram change the algorithm? Because I'm thinking, oh, what if by the time I'm ready to do this, that there's a whole, it's not bookmarks that are most important. It's some new thing. Like, how do you know what's up with the algorithm?
Yeah, honestly, the algorithm is such a mystery. Like that is under lock and key. It's really, I can't tell you how often that happens, or even really everything that's involved in the algorithm. You can follow different, like the social scheduler that I mentioned earlier later.
Mhm.
Like I get their newsletter, so it tells us change it now, they're talking about it. That's funny. But you can just kind of keep yourself educated on it a little bit. Like I
And
said,
how would you do that?
yeah, so the social scheduler that I follow later, that's what I use, later.com is the actual website. But they're always talking about the algorithm and things that are changing. Like there are insiders that can like tell you when things are shifting, but at the end of the day, just don't let the algorithm like mean too much. You know, we just want to be of service.
Right.
We'll show up and be authentic. And if we have our hype team that wants to like come and support the things that we're posting, then, you know, we can create that little community.
Got it. As just as everyone's talking, I'm like, I'm noticing something here. Algorithm is in charge.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely in charge. Instagram owns everything. They could delete our account at any time. And that's why it's important to have a newsletter and other ways to connect with people, because I mean, I have like almost 6,000 followers on Instagram. They're not mine, you know, and like 100 people might see the things that I post out of all those people.
Mm.
So it's like, kind of is what it is, but it is a way to reach people. And the more engagement we get, the more our stuff is shown to everyone.
Yeah. So don't put all our eggs in one bucket or basket, so to speak.
Yes, in the sense that make sure one of those baskets that you own.
Yes. Yes.
Because we could say, oh, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, so I'll go to Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and TikTok, and it's like that still, you know.
Yeah, no, yeah, because we don't own that. Got
Right.
it.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any last questions? I've got about 4 minutes left. Or if we're feeling complete, we can also feel complete. Yep. Cool. Well, I hope this call was helpful.
So full of great information, like, whoa.
Good. Sometimes, and I'll be honest, like I get on these calls and we all just start talking and then I'm like, oh my gosh, did I even stay on my train of thought? Did I fully answer all these questions? So it's just good to know it wasn't just a big bleh mess of information. Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. Appreciate
Thanks,
it, everyone.
Leslie. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.
Ciao, ciao.